Hey beautiful people, what is up and welcome back to my channel. And for today's video, I'm going to be ranking the last 11 eyeshadow palettes I tried, Neutrals edition. And I'm saying Neutrals edition because I've been trying a lot of eyeshadow palettes pretty recently. I haven't filmed with the vast majority of them, but because I've tried a bunch and there was this phase where I was in this sort of, I only want to wear neutral eyeshadow, only pretty much, I decided to actually split this video into two, where I'm going to be doing my neutral eyeshadows that I've been wearing, as well as the colorful version. Otherwise, it would be like 20 plus shadows, and yeah, it's just easier for me to separate it that way because I do think that there are some differences as to why I prefer specific neutrals versus specific colorful shadows. So today's video will just focus on the 11 neutral eyeshadow palettes that I've tried recently. If this is your first time joining me, hi, welcome. I'm Jamila and I love all things beauty. I love all things makeup. I love all things skincare, and I especially love sharing my tips and tricks for how to find high-end and luxury beauty products at bargain prices. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I would absolutely love if you would consider subscribing and joining the fam. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into this rankings. Okay, so coming in at number 11 is a palette that honestly hit me to put this in number 11 because it's not a bad palette, and you all know I love the brand, and that is the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Dollhouse palette. Okay, hear me out. This is a really nice palette. It's a beautiful color story, but I just feel like this wasn't for me, and it wasn't for me at the time that I picked this up. One thing I will say is that the Blend Bunny mattes are superb. They're my absolute favorite matte formula. So I had zero issues with the mattes in this palette. I actually really like the mattes in this palette. It's just that Blend Bunny is kind of like figuring out what shimmer formula they want to go with. And this is the older shimmer formula, which has a little bit more of a putty texture. When you put it on the eyes, it doesn't have that, like, you know, impact that I would want it to have. So when I was playing with this palette, I felt like, okay, this is nice, but it's not the neutral palette that I wanted to reach for. It's not the one that I thought about very often. So it kind of fell to the wayside. And I think the other downside of this palette and why it's ranking a little bit lower is because Blend Bunny recently released another neutral eyeshadow palette that I love way more. So the fact that that one I think is better quality, I ended up reaching for that one more over this one. So this isn't bad by any means, and quite frankly, the mattes in here are superb. It really is just the shimmers that I was like, meh, I could do without it, that this is falling in at number 11. Coming in at number 10 is a palette that I really wanted to like, but I don't know, something about it just didn't work out for me. Actually, I know what it was, and that is the Glaminatrix Nearly, is it Nearly Natural? Yes, it's the Nearly Natural palette. I keep wanting to say Nearly Neutral, but it's Nearly Natural. This is a gorgeous palette. Glaminatrix had been a brand that I was really interested in trying. I remember seeing their products release, and I remember seeing swatches, and I was like, I want to try the brand, I want to try the brand, I want to try the brand. This is an Australian-based brand, so for me, I was always thinking about the additional cost to have it shipped from Australia, including, you know, the conversion fee and all that extra stuff, and then the amount of time that it would take to get here. And Glaminatrix is a small indie brand in that they are pretty much testing out their formula, and some of their previous palettes would arrive shattered, the shades would be broken, then the brand would have to reformulate, and I was just like, that is too much. And when a brand is coming from another country and they have issues with shipping and things arriving broken, I am a little bit wary and hesitant to buy it because I'm like, is it gonna like arrive broken and then I just wasted my money? But what I saw was that this was arriving in like tip-top condition for most folks, so it didn't seem to be an issue. What I liked about this palette was the sort of curation of shimmers to mattes. Not only did they have really rich mattes that could work as transition shades for me, as well as really nice deepening up shades, but they had these sort of multiple layers of neutral shadows. Now, neutrals tend to be sort of that middle of the road, kind of like beige, browny kind of shades. But in my mind, I think of neutrals as those like greens and a little mauvey pinky shades. All of those in my mind fall within the neutral family. And I think this palette did a really good job at giving us that. So you do have a couple of greens. You have this kind of like mauvey shade with some other mauvey pinky shadows to match. Then you have like a copper, some standard golds, even like a cool toned shimmer here. And I think that they gave us so many different combinations that in my mind make sense. Like this is definitely a more warm tone deepening up brown, and this one is more cool tone. So you could really mix and match based on what vibe you were going for. And I really thought that I was going to like this. When I saw it, when it arrived, I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to hit the spot. But this did not hit the spot. I was so confident that this was going to hit the spot that I actually took this traveling on a work trip. And I remember hating my looks on that trip. And when I go to work, I'm at these very professional conferences and meetings. I need to not be like, oh my gosh, what is going on with my eyeshadow? And that's how I felt. And I feel like the reason why I did not like this palette is because the mattes did not perform well. I really struggled with these mattes. And if there's one thing y'all know about me, struggle mattes is not my cup of tea. I'm very, very picky. I'm very particular about my matte shadows because for me, mattes ground the look. And when I have to blend for forever and try to build and do all these kind of zhuzhin to make things work, it irritates me. So the fact that I had to work honestly very hard to make these mattes perform, it was really annoying. And then these shimmers, they don't really stick to the lid in that they have a lot of fallout to them. And again, I was there for a work trip, so I was really trying to not have to deal with glitter all over my face. So I should have not brought this on the trip without having tried it before. That was my own fault. But I didn't have a great experience using it, and after that I didn't want to use it at all. So this is falling in at number 10 because I didn't enjoy my experience using it. Will I try it again? Yes. But as of right now, this is palette number 10. What I will say about that Glaminatrix palette though is that the shimmers are super hyper sparkly. So if you like that extra sparkle, you will really like that one because it is very, very, very sparkly. I will just say put a glitter glue down or something so that it sticks to your eyes because you might have just glitter everywhere. Coming in at number 9 though is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Primrose palette. This is an older palette that I believe released in 2020 or 2021. So it's an older palette, but it was new to my collection. And I picked this up on Mercari, honestly, for free. Not for free, for very cheap. I got it brand new on Mercari, very cheap. And I was pleasantly surprised by this one. Now, this is a mix of a face palette and an eyeshadow palette. So you do get 2 blushes here, so ignore those. But I'm talking about the eyeshadows in this palette. The Anastasia Beverly Hills formula has definitely improved as of late. This is kind of pre the new Rose and Nouveau palettes, but I think that this is still that elevated formula. One, the pan sizes are the bigger size as well, but something about these mattes are super pigmented, super blendable, and the shimmers have really nice impact without having sparkle to it. A lot of times shimmers can be that like, oh, it has impact because it's super sparkly and you know, very glittery. These I think were very strong metallics, and I really liked that about this palette. And the Anastasia Beverly Hills formula is just easy to work with. And that is one of the things that I look for primarily with my shadows now. You know, I enjoy playing in makeup. I enjoy blending. I enjoy doing all of that. But I'm also very busy. I have things to do and I can't be here blending from now until my kingdom come. So when I find palettes that have shadows that are just easy to work with and you don't have to do a lot of things with it and you don't have to be like a super technical expert or makeup application expert, because I'm not a makeup artist. I have no skills in terms of like, I'm no professional. So if I can find a product and I can pick it up and just make it work, and I think that other people can pick it up and make it work, it definitely makes that more elevated in my book, because it means that my experience using it is going to be better. And for me, a lot about wearing makeup is the experience. And if I don't enjoy applying a palette, it's gotta go. It doesn't work for me if I don't enjoy the experience in addition to the final product. So I'm going to talk about the next 2 palettes together, and I did rank them, but I'm going to talk about this together because they basically a pair. So coming in at number 8 and number 7 are the Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana eyeshadow palettes. These were released during her holiday. This was a new format per Pat where she gave us quints. And the one that I put in number 8 is actually Nude Allure. This is the more pink, mauvey toned one. And it really is pretty. I just felt like it was okay. To be quite frank, these palettes were a little bit disappointing to me because I felt like they were just okay. I didn't feel any sort of special like tingle that I usually get when I use Pat McGrath palettes. It just felt like, this is nice. And one of the things I actually didn't appreciate about these palettes is that they have, they just have one shade. They just have one matte. So it is a very shimmer heavy palette with one matte. And granted, Patricia's mattes are the type of mattes that you can blend out to have them be really soft and then build it up in the corner so that you can get like a little bit of a gradient. But I personally prefer having at least 2 mattes in a palette. Give me a transition shade and then give me a deepening up shade. And the saving grace for this palette was that it had the brown in it. So this one came in at number 8. And number 7 I gave to the Bronze Bliss palette because these bronze shades I think are just superb. I preferred the shimmers in this versus the shimmers in the Nude Allure palette. I wish I could take the matte from Nude Allure, that brown matte, and put it with these shimmers. Like what I found myself actually doing with these palettes is actually using them together because I feel like this is such a pretty 10-pan palette. And the shades complement each other well. And by having the brown matte and the black matte, I could actually have 2 mattes. So I found myself using these together. But I do think that the bronze shimmers were better than the Nude Allure shimmers. So that's why this one is number 7, this one is number 8. Overall, they're not bad palettes. By no means. I don't think Pat has ever really put out a palette where the eyeshadow quality was just trash. I think they all perform and work well. It was just like preference to me. And I think the other thing that helped that rank a little bit lower is that I tried those Pat McGrath palettes at the time when I was really into neutral eyeshadow. So I had been trying a ton of neutral eyeshadow. So when you have so many options and choices of neutrals, you have to bring it. You know what I mean? You really, really have to bring it. And I felt compared to the other neutrals that I was trying, it wasn't giving me what I needed it to give. Coming in at number 6 is actually a palette that I originally really liked, but it has fallen on the list. Like I really thought that this was going to be higher. And that is the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. This caused pretty much a bit of a hullabaloo when it first released because it is a very deceiving product. And when you saw pictures and you saw swatches, it seemed like Mario was like, okay, I don't want anybody deeper than tan to be able to wear this palette. So I honestly picked this up out of curiosity because I wanted to see, is this going to work for my complexion? This is the deepest shade here, which leaves a lot to be desired. I think it could go deeper, but for my complexion, it does work well enough to have me for me to have like a deeper outer corner or a somewhat smoky eye. So I'm like, okay, it works for me. I can make it work fine. Whatevs. The reason why this palette really fell is because I feel like it was marketed as this sort of new, exciting, very ethereal. The shimmers were supposed to be extra special and different from all the other shimmers on the market. And honestly, this is the same old, and honestly not as good. The mattes, I felt like they were nice. They had a very buttery texture to it. But they were also a bit temperamental in that they did not work well with the eyeshadow primer that I was using. And I felt like they worked better with like the concealer when I switched it. So I had to figure out which base to use with these shadows because the first time that I used this, I actually experienced some patchiness in the eyeshadows, in the matte shades. And I was like, now Mario, you know this is $68. You can't be giving me no patchy eyeshadow. I need you to try better, especially considering that his previous palettes were significantly cheaper. The price of this felt out of place, you know? And then taking the patchy mattes aside, once I figured out the right base to use it with, it was fine. It was like, okay, great. But then you get to these shimmers, and when you swatch these shimmers, you can see the differences between them. But when you put them on the eyes, what I found was no matter what shimmer I put on the eyes, the looks looked the same. I would even layer shimmers, put 2 shimmers next to each other because you guys know I like to do multiple shimmers to kind of create a gradient. And it still looked the same. And when you have a palette that costs $68 and you have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shimmers, with one of them being a satin, that's the only one that I felt like was very distinct and different. These 4 shimmers, if I put 4 shimmers on my eyes, I should be able to see that there are 4 shimmers on my eyes. It shouldn't just look like one shimmer. And that is what I struggled with this palette, is that all of the shimmers look the same. And to make matters worse, these shimmers fade throughout the day. This was another palette that I took with me on a work trip because it's supposed to be, you know, easy breezy, very natural, very soft because, you know, that's Mario's vibes. So I took it to me on a work trip because I had a speaking engagement. And by the end of the day, my eyeshadow was gone. I have never had issues with my eyeshadow fading. Like some of them it fades slightly, but this one I was just like, where did all them shimmers go? And I was really disappointed by how this faded throughout the day. Granted, you're probably not wearing your eyeshadow for as long as I did because it was a conference, so okay, fair, whatever. But I have had shadows last so long on me for cheaper, so this definitely was a pretty solid disappointment. Now, if you do have a short engagement where maybe you're going out to dinner, you're not going to be out for very long, I think that that is a palette that would look really well because it does have a really nice sparkle and glow to the eye that's not super overwhelming like some of these other shadows. So I think that if you are like just doing a quick dinner, it is a palette that you would enjoy wearing. But for anything longer than 6-ish hours, even 6 hours might be pushing it, it's going to fade and then it doesn't look as nice. So for the price, the price and all of those other things considered, it definitely isn't one that I would recommend people pick up, but I'm not going to declutter it so far. I mean, I'm okay with it. I've been using it. It's fine. Okay, so we are at the top 5. These are the best of the best. The cream of the crop, you know. The goods. So coming in at number 5 is a little itty bitty baby Cutie palette that I've had in my collection for forever. This is the Nabla Cutie palette in, what is this even called? Nude. This is the Nude Cutie palette from Nabla. It is just a simple 6-band palette, but I think that this is such a well-rounded palette. First and foremost, the mattes in here are cream to powder mattes, which I think is just really nice considering you have a black, and sometimes black can be really intimidating and harsh. It is one that, because it's a cream to powder, you can slowly build and get really nice depth. And this, in my opinion, is true neutral. Like when I use this palette, I felt like I got like a solid neutral look. Sometimes neutral looks can lean more warm or lean more cool. This was straight up just neutral. And this, in my opinion, is like the perfect travel palette. If you know that you just want basic neutral looks for your trip, you can pick this up. You do get a more like sort of standard gold shimmer, a pinky shimmer, and then like a really nice satin shade. And I think that they did a really great job at including really good formulas in here. So these two are definitely more sparkly. This one is more satin. And then you have 3 pretty matte, cream to powder matte shades. The Nabla Cutie palettes, I've said this before, are a very, very underrated formula. They're just easy, breezy, really nice to travel with, and solid, good formulas. These were made in Italy as well, and I think that just the quality of the Nabla shadows are just really good, and they need a little bit more hype. Next is and this is number 4. Coming in at number 4 is the Royal Heritage palette from Oma Beauty. This is an old one. This is a throwback. When I tried the Oma Beauty Freedom palette, it just sparked something in me that was like, okay, clearly I've been missing out. So I like pretty much bought all of the Oma Beauty eyeshadow palettes. And I picked this one up specifically because Mel Thompson actually did a video on this several years ago. And she swatched it and she used it and she really spoke highly of the Oma Beauty formula. And she compared it to things like Pat McGrath. So it was one of the palettes that she raved about. And I was like, let me pick this up. And baby, this is superb. Now it definitely leans more pinky than neutral. Like you can see here, these 3 shades are definitely more sort of pinky purples. And then you have these 2 neutral shades. But in general, like I said, I feel like, neutral, browns, pinky, little mauvey, those are all kind of in my like neutral vein. And this palette is just splendid. And the shimmers in here, oh my gosh, they sparkle. They are so good. And something about the Oma Beauty formula just warms my heart. These shadows were also made in Italy, I believe. So they have, really, really good quality. The mattes I found to be really blendable, really pigmented. And Oma Beauty does a good job at picking shades that would work for a variety of complexions. Like, I have my transition shade. Someone lighter has a transition shade. I just feel like they put together such perfectly curated palettes that it's like so amazing. And the shimmers in here are that same sort of sparkly formula that's in the Freedom palette, which I love. And when you like shine a light on them, they just twinkle. And I just really enjoyed the look that I created with this. And the more I've played with the Oma Beauty formula, the more I enjoy the experience of using their palettes. So that's why it's definitely ranking higher, because it's good. It's really good. If you haven't already done so, buy yourself an Oma Beauty palette. Either start with the Freedom palette or that Royal Heritage one, because you will not regret it at all. Okay, coming in at number 3, we're at the top 3, is a palette that I had zero intentions of buying it, but Queer Bones, I know they bought it, and then I was like, okay, now I have to try it. And that is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Rose Metals palette. And I wasn't going to buy this because when this originally released, this was one of those palettes where every picture I saw of this looked different. And I couldn't tell if it was dark, if it was light, if it was like mauve or rosy. It was such a weird thing because every picture looks so different. And even their promo pictures, you could tell that there were filters and they upped the contrast and the saturation and all those other things because it just looked so different every time. And I decided to pick it up because, you know what, this is like my color story in reality, and when I started seeing real pictures of it, I wanted to give it a try. And I love this palette. I think the quality in this is superb, and I think that this color story suits me better than the Nouveau palette. I've talked about that one before, and honestly I was a little bit disappointed by it, and partly because I don't think that it was best suited for like me. I think that I saw a lot of lighter creators use it and they were raving about it, and then I tried it and I was like, oh no, child, this is not gonna work. But this one is bomb.com. This copper shade here is stunning, gorgeous. And like I said with the previous ABH palette, Anastasia has really upped their quality. They had really good quality to begin with, but I like that they took the exact same formula that they had and just made it elevated. Give it a little bit more punch, give it a little bit more blendability in that the mattes are creamier than they were before. I noticed that the mattes in the older palettes tend to be a little bit more powdery, which isn't a bad thing because the more powdery mattes I found are easy to blend, especially if you're newer to eyeshadow. But they gave this one a little bit more cream, but still kept like the blendability and the ease of use of it. And the metallics in here, they gave an extra punch. These metallics are stunning. They are beautiful. And one thing I appreciate about ABH is that they were able to elevate their formula without doing too much of anything else. Like ABH is one of those brands where you pretty much got mattes and standard metallics, and I felt like they've kept that without feeling like they have to, oh, now we need duochromes and we need toppers and we need all that other stuff so that it's a really busy palette. They just kept it simple with their metallics, but like bomb.com metallics and some really nice creamy blendable mattes, and it's a good one, y'all. I definitely prefer that one over the other one. Okay, coming in at number 2, I have to give it to the Blend Bunny Cosmetics All Done Up palette. You guys saw number 11 was the Dollhouse, and number 2 is the All Done Up palette because I think that this is the better neutral palette. This is a palette that when I saw it, I was like, wait, now hold up. Are these all like the same shades? And Blend Bunny is one of those brands where sometimes you see their palettes and you're like, okay, well, did we need 2 of those shades? Are they gonna look the same on the eye? And then you get it and you try it and you really see those differences because she, and by she I mean the brand and the brand owner, they put a lot of attention into those very minute color differences, the very minute differences in undertone and the things that a lot of us can disregard, but because there's so much effort put into thinking about the undertones and the different shades that are pulled together, I feel like it helps these products be so much more elevated. And what happened in this palette is that the shimmer formula changed. And that's why this is, you know, ranking so high, because the previous Blend Bunny shimmer formula was okay. It was more of that putty texture. It didn't have a ton of shine or like sparkle to it, but it was just kind of like, I could do without it. But these shimmers, super high shine, super sparkly, almost a little too sparkly, but better than the previous shimmers. And this is one where you get both sort of like the silver, the green, something that's a little bit more pinky, mauvey, like I mentioned, and then you have like a warmer neutral and then a more cool tone neutral. And I feel like this is such a well curated neutral palette in that you can either go down the rows and keep it very simple, very monochromatic, or you can mix and match, and all of these shades mix together so well. This is one that I have really been reaching for, especially when I need to get a matte for another palette that just doesn't have the mattes that I need. I've been reaching into these mattes because I think that these are the neutral mattes that I am missing in a lot of the palettes that I currently have. So definitely comes in at number 2. You already know Blend Bunny is my favorite matte formula, just hands down. And now that they've changed to this shimmer formula, at least I think that they've changed. Maybe it's just this palette, but hopefully it's all of them going forward. But now that they've changed to this shimmer formula, I think that they've just elevated their brand even more. And lastly, coming in at number 1 is actually the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes. I did film this look because I know I got a lot of questions about this when I did my last video wearing this look. And that is the Vanity Makeup Signature Palette. This is a brand that I don't think a lot of people know about or care for or are really monitoring. And this is the only palette that they have. When this was first released, a lot of people looked at it and was like, this looks very similar to Pat McGrath. And I get it. It has the very same setup. It has 2 extra shades. So instead of 10, it has 12. And this is also a palette that was made in Italy. And you can tell from like the component, it has a very Mothership looking vibe. It is just as heavy as the Mothership. So, you know, I was curious, is this going to perform like a Pat McGrath shadow? And while these are not the same formula, it is a very nice formula. And what I like about this shadow and this palette specifically is that the eyeshadow looks longer you wear it. When I apply this, usually when I'm wearing this, and I've worn this a couple of times, and every time I apply it, I'm like, not feeling it. And then I wait like a 10 minutes as the shadow settles into my lids, and it like evolves into something completely different. So like I'm not sure if the video of me filming this look will be up before this one, but if you watch that video, you'll see the application process of me putting it on, and you can probably be like, that's not that great. But then when I show you the final look, which is kind of after the eyeshadow has settled, it really does start to shine. And the quality of these shadows are really good in that, like I said, the longer you wear them, the better it looks, but it also lasts all day. I didn't experience any fading with this. Quite frankly, it looked better by the end of the day than I thought at the beginning. The mattes here are really nice and blendable, very pigmented, very easy to use. I had no issues with them. And I've even found it used for pretty much all of these shades. Like I've used all of the matte shades except this one, which is basically a blend out shade for me. But I've even used this really light shimmer. This is a very satin shimmer. These two are pretty satin. These are more sort of sparkly, chunky shaped shimmers. But this I've used as an inner corner highlight. And I want to put it all over the lid one day because it's really pretty. It's really pretty. It looks really light and basic in the pan, but it is genuinely a very pretty shade. And now this palette retails for $95. Is it $95? I think it's like $100. Maybe $100. So it is not a cheap palette, but I was able to get it for 25% off. And I know they do sales relatively frequently, so you don't have to pay full price for this. But at the sale price, I think that this is really beautiful. I think that the final look I was able to get using this is top notch. And this is definitely one that I have reached for more than I expected and more than I thought. And honestly, the sheer amount of times I've reached for this is why this is ranking so high. Because as you can see, I have my pick of neutral eyeshadow palettes, and these are just the ones that I've been testing recently. I have even more neutral eyeshadow palettes in my collection, so I have like a huge collection of neutral palettes that I could reach for. But the fact that I kept coming back to this one because I knew it would be one that would wear really well and that is just super stunning on the eyes really made this rank a lot higher than some of the other ones, which they're good, but they're not this good. So that is it for today's video. This was part 1 of my ranking the last eyeshadow palettes I've tried. This is the neutral edition. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because the colorful edition will probably be coming after this one. We will see how the editing goes, but it'll be coming really soon. If it's already up, I will link it down below. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe on the way out because there's a ton of content I have for you guys this year. As always, I appreciate every single one of you guys for watching and for supporting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye!